What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another video on the channel. So the Texas Rangers dropped game 1 in the Colorado series last night, losing 7-6. And looking at it on the surface, a loss is a loss. There is no sugarcoating that. However, I don't think it was entirely a flat loss that showed no life from the performance of the players. I do think there was some grit and overall competitiveness to the game that one might not see just because, oh, we lost the game. It was a tight, competitive baseball game that came down to the wire. If you saw the entire game, you would have known that. And there were some real good things coming out, but most importantly, a good breakout performance from a guy I think a lot of Rangers fans are going to start paying very close attention to, especially due to Seager being hurt and Josh Smith being hurt. I talked about him in yesterday's video about it's his moment to seize the opportunity, and that is Justin Foscue. So we've got a lot to go into. However, let's start with the elephant in the room, and that would be the MacKenzie Gore injury. MacKenzie Gore was pulled after one inning with left lat tightness, and the team called it precautionary. However, I do know a lot of times major league teams like to paint a prettier picture than there is in reality. And look, before anybody does panic, I do think it was the right call, but obviously I need to take me and you, we all need to take everything with a grain of salt, especially with what the manager says, because there's plenty of times in the past the manager has said, oh, this player's fine, he's healthy. For instance, with Corey Seager, Skip Shoemaker said he wasn't even contemplating putting him on the injured list, and then a few hours later they did. So here's what happened. Gore had a rough first inning, and there was an awkward looking dive for a bunt where you could tell something fell off with MacKenzie Gore. After the Rangers just shut it down. After that, the Rangers just shut MacKenzie Gore down. And then we came with pretty much a bullpen game. But Gore himself said it felt more like a cramp or an uncomfortable spot than a sharp injury. And the team said further evaluation was planned. Now, and I want to be clear about this, lat tightness and a left-handed pitcher is something you do not want to play around with. The lat muscle is directly connected to how a pitcher generates arm speed and extension. So those are big components of MacKenzie Gore's game as a pitcher. When a guy says something feels weird in that area, especially this early in the season, there's far more to lose by pushing through it than being cautious. And also, I think it's worth mentioning that David Davalillo, one of our top pitching prospects, is now in AAA. So if this injury with MacKenzie Gore does become more serious, we do have Davalillo, who has been a good pitcher in AA. So that is a little insurance option. We also do have Cal Quantrill as an insurance option. I think at this point in the year, Jacob Latz will not be considered to make a start since he is pretty much strictly our closer now. But going back to MacKenzie Gore, like I said, I'd rather lose him for a week than lose him for 3 months because somebody got stubborn and decided they wanted to pitch more, especially with how much prospect capital we gave up to acquire him. That said, losing your starter in the first inning at Coors Field is one of the worst case scenarios for a bullpen, and that brings us to the guys who had to pick up the pieces. So first out of the bullpen was Peyton Gray. He came in first and gave the Rangers 2 2/3 innings. He let 2 runs, 2 hits, a walk, and 3 strikeouts. Pretty serviceable, and for everything that going into that, that's not all that terrible. I know he let up runs, but a very weird circumstance for a pitcher to just be rushed into action. And it was very cold. Not that that's an excuse, but just circumstances. After that, Jalen Beeks came in and gave 1 1/3 innings, which is pretty solid. And then Gavin Collier allowed 1 run in his inning of work. Ultimately, that was the 7th run of the game, which was the high watermark that we couldn't overcome. Cole came in after him and was clean in a scoreless frame, so that's good for Cole to get things back on track. And Jacob Junis finished things off with a scoreless 9th inning. Overall, the bullpen mostly held together, like I said, but the reality is that when you lose your starter in the first inning, you're asking your relief corps to cover 8+ innings at Coors Field, one of the most hitter-friendly environments in all of baseball. I'm sure we're all well aware of that. And that is nearly a pretty impossible ask. The bullpen didn't collapse, which is good. Obviously, we used a lot of arms, so we'll see how that affects us later in the series. We'll see. Maybe we might need to make a roster move. But they couldn't fully contain the damage that came from having to use so many arms so early in the game. The Rangers gave up 7 total runs, as I said, and a lot of that damage came during a bad middle stretch where the Rockies extended the lead to 7-3. The good news, Texas didn't quit. So when I said they didn't quit, if you weren't watching the game, there's obviously a comeback. Down 7-3 entering the 8th inning, the Rangers put together a 3-run rally to make it 7-6, and it brought it down to a 1-run ball game in the 8th inning. And that's a team that has some fight in it. They couldn't complete the comeback entirely. The Rockies shut the door when it was all said and done, but the fact that they battled back against a bullpen in Colorado rather than rolling over and just letting the game fall away is pretty impressive in my opinion. And now, granted, the Colorado Rockies bullpen is nothing spectacular. I still like to see this fight, especially with how many players we have injured right now. Langford, Seager, Smith, etc. The frustrating part, they had to dig that hole themselves with the early pitching situation, which isn't great. However, if Gore goes 5 or 6 innings and this game is 4-3 game in the 7th, the Rangers probably win that baseball game. That's what makes it sting. And I think going forward, like obviously you would like to hope that your pitcher's not going to get injured. The starter pitches 5 to 6 innings, and that's a lot more manageable. So obviously this first game against the Rockies was weird circumstances in of itself. But that moves us forward to one of the biggest bright spots in yesterday's loss to the Rockies, and that's Justin Foscue. He is obviously gaining the runway now with Corey Seager injured. He is getting the bulk, pretty much the starting job at second base for the time being, as Ezekiel Duran moved over to shortstop. Justin Foscue was our first-round pick back in 2020 out of Mississippi State, and he's pretty much been buried in the farm system because we had Marcus Semien covering second, and then we had Nathaniel Lowe and Jake Berger covering first, which is Foscue's secondary position. But today, he is finally being able to prove himself now that he's getting extended at bats. He went 3 for 3 with a walk. He had a home run, 2 doubles, 3 RBIs, 1 run scored, and 2 of those RBIs came with 2 outs. So that's very impressive in my opinion. He's 27 years old, and so it's now or never for Justin Foscue. But the cool thing is he was doing damage in multiple leverage spots throughout the game. An RBI double in the 2nd, a solo homer in the 5th, and another RBI double in the 6th. So it's not like he was just getting these lousy hits whenever the game didn't matter. The game was completely on the line. So right now, as it stands, Justin Foscue is no longer just taking up a roster spot. This guy is trying to make a statement to prove that he belongs at the big league level for the foreseeable future. Whether that's with the Rangers or a different organization, he's trying to make that statement. And I'm happy to see what Justin Foscue can do. And here's why I think it matters beyond just one game. I've watched Foscue in previous stints with the Rangers. Every time he's come up, he's gotten very sparse playing time. A few bats here, a start here, and then he's back to AAA. So you never really he never really got a chance to see what he could do with a consistent everyday reps at the big league level. That's a really hard situation for any hitter because rhythm and timing matters enormously in baseball. It's all about the routine and sticking with the consistent routine. And when that's all in flux, it's really hard for a young player trying to make his way into the big leagues. So you can't hit when you're looking over your shoulder every day wondering if you're going to be back down in AAA the very next day after one bad performance. Well, that situation has obviously changed with the Seager injury, and so now it's really going to be interesting to see what happens and if Foscue can take advantage of this playing time. But having worked with the Dodgers player development system, as I've told you guys previously, I can tell you the difference between a prospect who gets 50 play appearances scattered across 3 MLB call-ups and a prospect who gets 200 straight play appearances in a starting role is enormous. You see completely different players, and Foscue showed last night that he belongs if he can keep up this consistent, good approach at the plate. Now, I guess the only thing we need to see as far as fans is if this is sustainable. Moving on, I do want to shout out Ezekiel Duran. He was one of our other shining pieces from last night's game. He went 3 for 4 with 2 RBIs, 2 runs scored, including a big RBI single during the 8th inning comeback attempt. Duran has quietly been one of the more consistent bats for the Rangers since Seager went down, and last night he gave the Rangers a real 1-2 punch out of the middle infield. That is not something anyone was expecting really coming into this season, that Ezekiel Duran was going to be a serviceable player. I personally thought in the offseason that the Rangers were going to DFA him and he was going to have to find some other organization. So good on Chris Young's part to still see potential in Ezekiel Duran after he had 2 consecutive bad seasons in 2024 and 2025. Now, here's where I land on this. Yes, a loss is a loss, and yes, it's frustrating dropping games to the Astros and the Rockies, who are some of the worst teams in the league, just based off a pure record standpoint. 2 series against teams who probably won't even be in the playoffs this year if things hold as they are. So that's really frustrating for a team like the Rangers, who aren't too far out from leading the division. But the offense last night showed real fight, so I'm appreciative of that instead of just rolling over when MacKenzie Gore went out and we were down by a few runs. And Foscue arguably had the best game of his big league career. Duran was excellent. The bullpen grinded through a pretty hard situation to get through. And Gore's injury, while concerning in the short term, appears to be a precautionary and manageable. But if things change, I will let you guys know and break down a video on that, of course. So game 2 is tonight. The Rangers need to win badly, and they can't afford to lose a series to the Colorado Rockies. That would honestly be demoralizing from a standpoint, in my opinion, especially when you thought you had a pretty easy road trip with the Astros and the Rockies being 2 teams on there. So let's go and see if the fight from the Rangers can translate into today. Hopefully we get a good start. And if you enjoyed the video, please drop a like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. I break down Texas Rangers news, rumors, and prospects. And let me know in the comments, are you buying the Justin Foscue game as a legitimate everyday player for the Rangers for the 2026 season? Or do you think last night was just one big game for Justin Foscue? And I want to hear your take. I'll see you guys in the next one, and let's go Rangers.